watching the Jennylyn Show, and tonight I have Jason Reynolds, who has joined me on my set tonight to tell us about his 3D printing. And he has brought some cool stuff to share with us. I met Jason earlier this year at the Arts and Wine Festival, and he wanted to know who I was, so I asked him who was he, and if he had a good story to share with me, and he said, actually, I do. And I said, do you have something on you that makes you special, that you can show me? And he goes, as a matter of fact, I do, my shoes. And he took them off and showed them to me, and I knew he had to be a guest on the Jennylyn Show. Jason.
How do you do?
Thank you for coming.
The pleasure's mine.
And I'm very sad that you haven't come in my favorite shoes.
I'm sorry. I should have. I definitely should have.
Because I've been telling all my friends this guy was wearing shoes that came out of his printer.
That's right.
And they think I'm trying to be funny. So let's start with your 3D printing. And your company is called Jinxbot.
Right. So Jinxbot is a company I started about 2 years ago out of a hobby that I've had for the past 5 years from a technology that I heard about 8 years ago. I was a major in Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and in one of the labs we had a 3D printer. I think it was from Stratasys or from one of the other big companies at that time. There were a whole lot of small 3D printer companies at that time. And I got to see the technology and see its potential, and it was absolutely fantastic. I mean, to be able to take a model, a thought, a dream that someone has, and be able to make it into something real really spoke to me. And I found out about that technology. I started learning all I could about it, and eventually when I was able to afford a printer of my own, I did so, and I haven't looked back since.
How long ago was that?
That was about 2012. And I did or invested in a Kickstarter campaign, and I got one of the cheapest 3D printers that you could buy at the time, an M3D. It was a really fantastic product. And you know, I actually grew out of it from some of the projects. The build volume wasn't as big as I wanted it to be. So then I think it was around 2015, 2014, at around November, I was looking around for 3D printers on Craigslist, and I found a brand new MakerBot in the box for a reasonable price. And that was my own Black Friday gift to myself. So I bought it, and I have been printing with it pretty much constantly since for the last 2 years.
Wow. So when I met you, I kind of nailed you in the middle of the street with a commitment to KMVT.
You really did.
I'm so shameless. I said, can you do some free 3D printing for KMVT? And you said yes. And I looked at the guys that were on the camera, and I go, this is on tape, right?
That's
so
right.
You can't get out of this. And then I came to the station, I'm like, I got you guys some free 3D printing.
Yeah.
And they said, what are we going to do with it? What's the answer to that question?
Well, it's kind of a frustrating answer, but it's the only one I have. Really, the answer is you can do anything you want with it. 3D printing allows you to really make any shape that you can come up with. So if you have a widget that you need printed or a tool that needs to be customized in some sort of way, that's where really 3D printing shines its best. A lot of people will say, oh, well, can you 3D print this little widget for me? And I say, well, that's not the best application because it's either too detailed, or maybe it's already mass produced. So you're going to be paying a premium for a customized object that's not customized. 3D printing really comes into play when you have something that really needs to be just exactly what you need it to be. Either a tool or something that is like a cosplay where it's, you know, custom to your dress or your person. That's where 3D printing can really come in.
Because when we think of printing, we think of you send a document to a printer and you hit print. And the page slides out with whatever was on the command you sent it.
Right.
So why do they call this 3D printing? Because I think that's where people get confused. Can you speak to the difference?
Sure, absolutely. So traditional printing with, say, an inkjet printer, you send a document like a Word doc file that you'd make on your computer, and you'd send it to your printer, and then the printer automatically takes its ink and its letters, and it prints it out on the page for you, and then you have your print.
Right.
The difference for 3D printing is you'll take a 3D object, and that could be anything. So say, for instance, one of these shapes. So one of these shapes here is developed over a CAD software. So CAD stands for Computer Aided Design. And that CAD software allows you to make this 3D object in virtual reality, or a virtual 3D object. So then, like a printer, then you'd send it off to a printing software called a slicer. That slicer, quite literally, takes your 3D object and slices it into about 5 to 1,000 different slices. And the printer then takes that information, extrudes it one layer at a time, and then creates your 3D object. So a little bit more specifically, it will slice your object like it would, and then print that one slice. Then the print bed drops down a little bit, and then it prints the next slice right on top of it. And it drops down again, prints that next slice right on top of that. And it continues and continues until you have a 3D object.
And how long does that take? How long did it take to print that orange thing that looks like a carrot?
The orange thing that looks like a carrot took around 6 hours to print. Now, you might be saying, I don't want to wait 6 hours for a Word document, but for a 3D object, it's got to do a lot of calculations, and it has to print and make sure each layer is adhering to the previous layer. So there's quite a bit more involved. I've had prints take anywhere as little as 15 minutes to as much as 36 hours.
I would love to see what the printer looks like. Does it look like an average printer, or is it a big monstrosity?
It's kind of a big monstrosity.
Ah, that's what I
So
thought.
definitely looks different from your traditional inkjet printer.
Okay.
You'd see them look more like a box. And then you'd have inside this box what's called an extruder. So this extruder is nothing more than a hot glue gun. So that hot glue gun extrudes glue. The printer extrudes plastic in the exact same way, but except for instead of your hand producing that layer and then moving on to the next one, it's done by some motors and some computers that will allow you to set your file, set it to print, and then you don't have to touch it until it's done.
So every single, like you've brought several pieces of work that you've created, including your hat. Should we start with your hat?
Sure.
You don't have to take it off, but tell us what part of it you printed.
So I printed the geodesic portion of this print. So the beanie is just a beanie, and then I wrapped it with this 3D printed geodesic dome. It was downloaded off of a website called Thingiverse. Thingiverse.com is Thingiverse. It's great.
Okay.
But it's a repository of hundreds of thousands of models that people upload for free because they made a model, they enjoy doing it, and want to share that 3D model with the world. And that's a platform for people to do that. Then people with a 3D printer can download that model and print it and then create a copy of it for themselves.
So let me ask you, how economical is it? Because if one carrot takes 6 hours,
Sure.
how do you make money with a printer like this? Because you could only print one, maybe 3 in a day.
Sure. What I do with my printer is I list it on a website called 3D Hubs. And that website allows me to put my printer out to everybody in the world. Specifically kind of just my area, but really anybody who wanted to can place an order with me.
Okay.
And then I make time on my printer to print their object for them. So it does take a while, but what I charge for this is based off of the volume of the print. So I have a computer program that figures out the exact volume of the object that I want printed, and then it comes out with a price, and then the customer agrees on that price, and then I print it for them. Usually I'll either drop it off to them, but I can also mail it to them too.
So you wouldn't make like toys for Happy Meals at McDonald's?
No. And that speaks to what we were talking about earlier. those toys are mass produced. They're injection molded. And that is a process where they inject mold or inject a plastic into a mold.
Okay.
And they do that over hundreds of thousands of times. And that brings the cost of those individual prints down quite a bit.
Okay.
These are if you say wanted your specific hand to be a model, and then I want my individual hand to be, say, either scanned or modeled, and then print my custom object, print my custom hat, print my custom shoes, whatever it is that custom object is. Or maybe you're an inventor and you have a really fantastic idea for the next widget, but you don't know where to get the pieces to assemble your machine.
Yes.
So you design them yourself, and then you print them yourself.
Got it. Now I
That's where it
understand when you
comes.
would use it. So do you use different colored materials? Because that's orange. I see some. Let's talk about the black guy over there that looks
Sure.
like Lion King.
Yeah.
Can you pick it up and tell us about that?
Sure.
What
So-
instigated that whole...
This is a really fun print called the Hairy Lion. So if you were to Google that, you'd come up with some interesting images, but a lot of these guys. So the Hairy Lion was developed by someone who wanted to think outside the box with 3D printing. And it's actually using a weakness of 3D printing as a strength. So this person came up with the hairy lion, and it's just a normal print of a lion. But what they did was they added these strands, and these strands are actually printed straight out. So he kind of looks like maybe if you were to imagine him being electrocuted and his hair is standing out on
Yeah, yeah.
So that's how he is originally printed. Then once he's finished printing, there's a sacrificial wall that I cut off. And then he's left with his hair all frizzy. And then I take a heat gun, which is a fancy word for a really hot hair dryer. And I kind of give him a blowout or a blowback. And I push his hair back, and then I shape his hair in the way I wanted. So the weakness of the 3D printing was the fact that all of these printers were printing individual strands, and usually you don't want that. You want solid objects. But it's taking these individual strands and using that to an advantage as an aesthetic choice for this print or this model.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a pretty good hairstylist, if you don't mind.
I was going to say, if you get tired of this, you can try hairdressing.
Sure, sure.
I recommend you. Sounds like you've already got your curling iron and your blow dryer.
I'll have to borrow it from my wife.
Yeah, so tell us about these other pieces that you have here.
Happy to.
Yeah.
So there are different types of 3D printing.
Okay.
These were printed off of a process called FDM printing, or fused deposition modeling. And that's a very common type of printing, and it's the most cheapest type of printing.
Okay.
Then there's another type called SLA printing, commonly referred to as resin printing. SLA stands for stereolithography, so there's some
Okay.
fun terms there.
Yeah.
But stereolithography, or STL, or printing, or SLA printing, is done with lasers and resin. So the liquid resin is cured by that laser in those specific patterns, layer by layer, like FDM printing. But you can see from some of these models that
Can I pick it up?
Absolutely. The detail that you can achieve with resin printing is so much more detailed, so much more fine. It looks as if it was a finished product, an injection mold.
And how sturdy, how these won't break very easily, will they?
No, similar to any household product, if it was
Yes.
made out of plastic, I'm sure if you were to really try to break it and throw it against the floor or try to crush it, I'm sure it would break eventually. But no, these are common plastic everyday items that you'd find, so that it's the same durability.
Does your house have like a whole stack of stuff that you printed?
It does. And my wife, she's, bless her heart, she's gotten used to it. I wouldn't say she's okay with it, but I've printed so many things around the house. My house is riddled with 3D printed objects. In fact, one of our lamps that come down from the ceiling, the cover for the lamp broke, so I wanted to print a replacement for it. And as I was making it in my 3D modeling program, I was going to revolve it so it would be a complete circle. And then I needed a profile to print the profile for the lamp. So instead of just coming up with a random profile, I traced my face.
Oh dear. Why didn't you bring a picture of this to show us?
I should. It recently broke, unfortunately, again. But I rotated that around, so now I have a perfectly rotated profile of my face for the lamp.
Very creative. So tell us about this. This must have been a challenging project.
Sure.
Because this one is not just a piece, it's several pieces.
Right.
So did you have to create this in individual pieces and then assemble it? Tell us.
Sure. So this is what I'll refer to as my companion Rubik's Cube. So the companion cube is from a really fun game that I just love called Portal. And in that, you carry around a cube with you, and you help solve puzzles with it. And this cube, I found a 3D model of it, sliced it up, and then adhered it to a Rubik's Cube. So what's great about this concept is that it doesn't have to be a companion cube. It could be just about anything. It could be either a sphere or any other shape that I wanted to. So I was able to make a facade out of this model and then adhere it to my Rubik's Cube. So now I have a fully functional, real working Rubik's Cube that allows me to create any shape that I want with it. It's fantastic.
I am fascinated, but here's what I'm still confused about. Do you have to pour like liquid something in the printer to produce these items? Do you have to get like wax or a big slab of something that gets melted and transformed into these objects? How does that part of it work? Great
question. So 3D printing uses, or at least FDM printing that we've been talking about, uses a plastic called PLA, and that stands for polylactic acid. And PLA is a very common plastic. It's actually biodegradable. It's a sugar-based plastic, and it's very common. I'm sure you've have some in your house already. And it comes in a reel, kind of like you'd see in a wire.
Like cable wires.
Cable wires. So that wire, that PLA plastic is spooled up, and it's sold in about 1 kilogram. And it's not terribly expensive, and then you feed it into your printer, much like your hot glue gun. So if you think about a hot glue gun stick, that stick is your filament.
So as it comes into the printer, there's intense heat that melts it and then creates the formation that you have fed it into.
It's exactly right.
I am so brilliant, aren't I?
You got it.
That is really amazing, because I kept thinking, now, okay, so you can buy this in different colors. So
Absolutely.
It comes in all different types of colors.
Not only different types of colors, but different formulations. So PLA is the most common, but there are different variations of PLA that you can use. People use wood-infused PLA. Okay. And that will take stain just like a wood print. And you can sand it down, you can work with it just like you would wood. There's metal-infused PLAs.
Wow.
There's brass, copper, there's even kind of a gold color that looks really nice. And in fact, I printed cake toppers for my wife. When we were married, I printed little cake toppers out of us, and it was fantastic.
That is so awesome.
Yeah.
That is really amazing that you can even do that.
Absolutely.
So the printer has got several different chambers in it with different temperature controls, depending on what you want to print.
Yeah, so there's multiple extruder heads that you can have. So you can have a dual extruder. There's even some that have a melt-away support material. So I said support material, but let me explain that a little bit. So if you were to print the letter T, so you would have kind of going out like this, and then you have kind of a 90-degree angle. So you'd go up and a 90-degree angle. So if I'm trying to print, and it gets up to this point, and it's trying to print over here, it's actually printing on nothing. It's printing on air. And because it's liquid hot plastic, it droops a little bit. So you need to build support material up here in order for it to print out and correctly. So if I want to print a really complicated object, and it'd be really difficult to remove that support material, they have a support material that dissolves in water. So you can print this incredibly complex object, and then with all these supports that would normally be impossible to remove, and then dip it in water, and then all those supports melt away, and then you're left with your perfect object.
Fascinating. If you print something you're not happy with it, can you melt it and put it back in?
You can actually. 3D
I
printing
was kidding. You can?
3D printing is very recyclable. In fact, I have a recycling program for my company that I take all of the, either a failed print, because failures do happen, and then I tear that up, remelt it, and then I can use that same material over again.
Economical.
Exactly.
That's so great, because I would imagine the material is costly, depending on what type of material you're
Exactly.
using.
Some are cheap, some are more expensive. Depends on your application.
So when someone has a birthday or an anniversary in your family, they're getting a 3D something.
Pretty much.
How do they react to that?
They're very appreciative. They're very supportive of it. And because it's a custom object, it's head and shoulders above the macaroni drawing that I normally would have made them.
Well, if you believe it, we're almost out of time. I don't know where the time goes when people are sharing their fascinating expertise and inventions with me.
It's because you're so amazing.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you.
Of course.
So before we wrap, I don't want us to run out of time without you telling me what people should really know that I didn't ask you. Because I always ask questions, but there's always something they really want people to know that I didn't think to ask.
Sure.
Is there anything that comes to mind that we haven't covered?
3D printing isn't magic. There is a incredible lot of work.
You just popped my bubble.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I apologize.
Yeah, so it's not magic.
It's not magic. There's a lot of work that goes into 3D printing, not only for 3D printing your object, but even for home projects. So if you get a 3D printed object and you're wondering why it isn't absolutely perfect, well, it's a prototyping. 3D printing was, way back in the day when it was first coined, it was rapid prototyping. So it's not for finished products, it's to help you along. 3D printing has taken product development from months and years to days and weeks. So if you're an inventor, or if you're just some kid with an idea, or if you've got some fantastic invention that you want to make, 3D printing is absolutely your way to do it.
Well, I tell you, you are in the right place with this, because this is the Silicon Valley, where all the startups are.
I've printed for a lot of companies.
Do they all know about you, or do you have a lot of competition?
I don't, surprisingly. I'm trying to build up my business as being one of the best in the business. One of my key features is that I have very quick turnaround times. Even for companies, very large companies, that have their own 3D printers, I've printed for them. I don't think I should mention them on air, but I have printed for a lot of these companies that you'd think they'd have their own, but sometimes they're a finite resource within that company. So they can't get access to them, so they print with me, and I print with them, and I turn it around the next day.
And I would imagine with a startup, it's not economical to buy one of those. Because you're just going to need a few prototypes, right?
Exactly.
Unless you're mass producing inventions.
Well, and then you think about it, you're going to have someone train on the printer, learn how to use it, and depending on the printer it can take a lot of babysitting. So it's definitely something that's going to need a lot of time and attention. So I'm happy to lend my services out.
And I also know that you teach. Do you teach 3D printing classes at Stanford?
I don't,
Okay.
but I do at local libraries.
Okay.
So I've been partnering with local libraries to offer free classes to whomever wants to learn about not only 3D modeling, but 3D printing as well.
Why would anybody, random person, want to know? I'm just asking because I don't know.
Sure. So
Why would they want to know about 3D printing?
If you had something that you needed to recreate in your house. My wife has an automatic wine opener, and the button broke. And I taught her how to recreate that button in 3D modeling, and then I printed that button for her. Now we have a new button for our automatic wine opener.
Wait, you taught her how to recreate that. What do you mean, like a computer drawing of it?
Exactly.
Ah, and then she just brought it to you and go, here, honey, this is what we need replaced in the house.
Exactly.
I love it. I think this is great. So I would imagine when your children are born, Toys R Us is not going to get very much business from you.
Not at all. No, I'll have them making their own toys.
That is so awesome. And you, besides teaching the classes and printing for startups, Can random families who just want to make something contact you and say, we want to make this for Freddie for his birthday, and come to you and you'll make it for them?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
is that very expensive?
No, not terribly. For something small, especially with FDM printing, it can be pretty affordable. And if you need help, if you've never 3D printed before, I am so happy to walk you through the process, help you understand how much it'll cost, even ways to reduce those costs, and tell you everything that you need to know. I love helping people. I love the spark that I see when I hand something that they designed, that they dreamed up and created, and I hand it to them. Their eyes light up, and that means the world to me. I love helping people.
That is awesome. I do too. So I think that life is so short that what is better than making someone else happy?
Exactly.
So we are almost out of time. We're down to 2 minutes real quickly before we go.
Sure.
Tell me very quickly about the glow-in-the-dark, because we didn't talk about that
Sure.
yet.
This is going to date me a little bit, but it is a recreation from an old game show on Nickelodeon called Guts. It's not on the air anymore, but it was the trophy that was...
You didn't win.
That I didn't win. I always wanted to go on that show, and I wasn't able to, so I made my own. And I even made a glow in the dark.
There you go. If you don't win an award and you have a 3D printer, you can make your own award, right?
That's right.
Jason, I am so grateful that you came up to me at the Arts and Wine Festival, because I've heard of 3D printing and I've never really understood exactly what it was.
Well, I hope you do now.
I do, and it's fascinating to me, and I'm going to think of what I can bring to you to print for me. Thank you for watching the Jennylyn Show. Thank you to my wonderful crew. I don't know how I could ever do one of these shows without you guys. Jason, thanks for sharing your expertise. If you're a young person watching this show and you think you're an inventor, put together your prototype. Jason, how can somebody connect to you?
Sure.
Find you, sorry.
No, absolutely. You can find me through my website, jinxbot.com, jinxbot.com, and I am happy to help in any way I can.
So he may start your dreams of invention going by giving you the prototype of what you've dreamed up. And again, thank you for watching the show, and I will see you next time. Jason.